On this week's episode of Capital City Sports, men's basketball takes on Ole Miss, and we have an SEC Roundtable discussion as well as a roundtable for the Super Bowl. This is Capital City Sports. Hello everybody and welcome into this week's episode of Capital City Sports. My name is Jeremy Urso. On January 18th, the men's basketball team was looking to get their first win in SEC play against Ole Miss. For more information, we take it to Stan Smith.
So far, it's been tough sledding for the Gamecocks men's basketball team as they've started off SEC play 0-3. However, the past two losses have been by a combined 11 points. The Gamecocks look to turn it around against Ole Miss. Let's take it to the highlight.
First half action, Ole Miss turns the ball over, picked up by Michael Carrera. He goes in for the layup. Foul is called and he gets the bucket to go. He'll also hit the free throw and the Gamecocks will take the lead. Later in the half, Michael Carrera goes up, almost dunks the alley-oop. He'll finish with 8 points on the night. Jalen Shaw would hit 2 3-pointers in the game, both coming in the first half. Here's an assist from Ringer, and then here's a pass from Thornwell to Carrera, and then back to Shaw for corner pocket for 3. Another fast break opportunity for the Gamecocks. Carrera passes it up to Thornwell. He drives inside. He misses the layup. He picks up his own rebound and gets the basket. On to the second half. Thornwell would finish with a game-high 24 points. Here's the first three-pointer of the half that he got. Second one coming up. And why not a third three-pointer? Ole Miss was not going to lie down as Marshall Henderson gets the ball, hits a three-pointer. Ensuing possession, Marshall drives inside, gets the foul and the bucket to go in. Dwayne Notice drives to the basket, gets the foul call by Marshall Henderson. He would not hit the free throw, but the Gamecocks would lead 64-61. Next Ole Miss possession, they would shoot a three-pointer, miss it, but two Rebels are there to clean it up for the dunk. 6 seconds to go. Marshall Henderson in to throw the inbounds pass, throws it over everyone's heads, and it's a turnover picked up by Brenton Williams. He eagerly calls a timeout. The refs do not see it. He dribbles down the court. The ball goes out of bounds. The Gamecocks would keep possession, but with only 2 ticks to go. Last-ditch effort by the Gamecocks. Thornwell throws up a prayer, does not hit the shot, and the Rebels would win 75-74, dropping the Gamecocks to 7-10.
After the game, Coach Frank Martin vowed to work harder than he ever has before to help get the team out of its losing streak. Their next game is on the road at Georgia. For Capital City Sports, this is Stan Smith.
The men's basketball team will hope to get revenge against Ole Miss as they travel away to Oxford this Saturday on February 1st. Although it was a light week in sports here in Columbia, we have a new segment here on CCS. It's called SEC Roundtable Discussion. For more information, let's take it to the table.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of the SEC Roundtable. I'm your host, Nick Jones. We're here with Haley Anders, Dalton Abel, Brett Williams, and Katie Davis. So we're now into 6 games in the SEC play for men's basketball. So what's your take on the league's performance so far, Dalton?
6 games into the season, and we do not have a lot of answers. Outside of Kentucky and Florida, there's really a lot of shuffling going on in the middle of the conference. 10 of the 14 teams have records of 500 or better within the conference. So teams are going to have a lot of chances to reestablish themselves and make runs maybe to overcome early season struggles. You look at a team like Missouri, 3-3. They spent a good amount of the early season in the top 25. They have matchups coming up, home to Kentucky and at Florida in their next 2 games, and they're going to have a lot to prove there.
I think Missouri is a great team to watch, particularly given what they've done in the SEC, this being their second year really established in football and volleyball, and it's really sports across the board. So you got to see how they're going to stack up when they get to the brunt of their basketball slate.
And Missouri has 2 of the top 3 scorers in the SEC, Jabari Brown and Jordan Clarkson, so they have the weapons to do it. It's just a matter of getting that big statement win. A couple tough losses early on, but they can bounce back from it. You look at a team like Alabama, also sitting at 3-3 in the SEC. They have 10 losses overall. 7 of them came in the non-conference. Usually don't see a team with 7 non-conference losses get into the tournament, but they played such a good non-conference schedule that they played teams like UCLA, Duke, Xavier, Wichita State, Oklahoma, but they beat none of them. So while they didn't have any bad losses, they didn't take the opportunity to make a big statement win. So, I mean, you look at that and we'll see if they can overcome. Right now, Joe Lunardi has 3 SEC teams in the tournament, and the third team is Tennessee, not Ole Miss, not Missouri. So I think they have a chance to get 4 or 5 in.
So what's your take on Frank Martin and the Gamecocks are doing so far this season?
Yeah, South Carolina has been revitalized, in terms of fan base. Last week's game against Ole Miss, they drew their largest crowd in recent memory, I think maybe in history. And he's been preaching that maturity and experience take time, but I know just watching him, he had to apologize for his outlash against Bretton Williams that he wants results now because he doesn't want the faithful Carolina crowd to lose trust in him. He's trying to build a program from the start, but losing 6 SEC games in a row to start the conference schedule has definitely been tough for him to swallow, especially the way they've been losing the games. The game against Ole Miss, you lose by 1 point. There's a particular stretch in the game where they got to the line 6 times in a minute and they missed 4 of them. Those are opportunities you have to capitalize on. Carrera missed a layup with 10 seconds to go that could have cut it to 2, and they just would have been in a better situation to win. 2 seconds left. I know it's a tough inbound play, but just not getting great looks, and the fouling is something. They're consistently in the bonus 10 minutes into the half. So if you're sending the other team to the line for easy buckets for the majority of the half, it's going to be tough to make up those points.
Now, when we talk about lack of experience, the guys' basketball team's doesn't have a lot of experience right now, but the girls' basketball team does, and it's obviously showing. So what do y'all think about the girls' basketball team, their performance so far this season?
Well, the women are doing quite well now, 18-2, 6-1 in the SEC. Had a huge statement win at Vanderbilt the other day and have recently gotten to number 7 in the AP poll. So certainly something to build on with what Dawn Staley is doing. Currently, the latest bracketology has them as a number 2 seed in the tournament. So we'll look to see if they can make a decent run going forward.
I think a number 2 seed is really that key place to be, because you look at the recent tournament history. If you're not on the top line or the second line, you have a tough time making it to the Final Four.
And there's always that stigma of having a number 1 seed. I mean, obviously on the men's side, you had the number 1 overalls win the last 2 seasons, but there's always somebody gunning for you.
Yeah.
And you got to look for those 8 and 9s to come out.
Yeah.
Or if you're a 2 to number 15, like a Florida Gulf Coast. So.
Yeah, in the men's tournament, you see a lot. Butler as an 8 seed made it all the way to the championship. Wichita State as an 8 seed went to the Final Four, or 9 seed, and but in the women's tournament, if you see a 3 or a 4 seed make it to the Final Four, that's big news. So being in the top line or 2 for the South Carolina Lady Gamecocks would be a very big deal.
So that's going to wrap up our basketball talk. We'll be coming back after this commercial break, and we'll talk about some baseball. We're back with the SEC Roundtable, and now we're going to pick up with baseball. So, Katie, what's your preview for this season?
Well, the road to Omaha is going to be starting on Valentine's Day as the college baseball season kicks off on February 14th. Baseball America's preseason top 25 rankings came out this week, and they have 8 SEC teams in the top 25, with South Carolina coming in at number 7 as the top SEC team. Virginia is ranked number 1, and last year's winner of the World Series is UCLA at number 12. With an absence of SEC in the top 6, what do you think it's going to be like? What's the competition going to be like for SEC?
Well, Katie, the competition's fierce this year. Cal State Fullerton is sitting at number 4. They've made several runs to the tournament before. 3 out of the top 6 are from the ACC. NC State has the number 1 prospect in Carlos Rodin. They're sitting at number 5 right now. Florida State is at number 6, and they're having Jameis Winston come out to play this year. It's going to be tough, especially with Virginia sitting at number 1. They have their head coach Brian O'Connor coming back for his 11th season, and he's led them to multiple ACC titles and also to 2 College World Series.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. SEC has a lot of competition outside of the conference, but within the SEC, Vandy's got a notable pitcher. Tyler Beatty is number 7 prospect. He turned down a $2.4 million deal to the Blue Jays a couple years ago when they drafted him. But last year he had a 14-1 record with a 2.32 ERA, so he's going to be big. But talking about pitching, that's one thing that USC has got to figure out is their pitching. They have to figure out what they're going to do with their weekend starters, especially with Jack Wynkoop and Jordan Montgomery.
Absolutely. And also, you have the returners, Grayson Griner, Joey Pancake. You have Grayson behind the plate, Joey in the infield. The power at the plate is really going to come from Joey Pancake. He was represented in the Home Run Derby and did excellent. Grayson and Joey were both All-American baseball players in the preseason, which is a high honor.
Yeah, both earned those honors. And Grayson Griner has earned the ranking of number 24 prospect, and he's also the number 2 catching prospect in the nation. And Joey Pancake was also given the ranking of number 40 prospect by Baseball America. So they've got to figure out that pitching, but I think they've got a shot at it. So.
Well, we're going to take a commercial break, and then when we come back, we're going to preview the Super Bowl.
And we have another dose of the roundtable discussion for Sunday's big game in East Rutherford, New Jersey. That's right, we're talking about the Super Bowl between the Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks. For more information, we take it to the table again.
We're back, and the Super Bowl is this Sunday as the Denver Broncos will be taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Brett, how do you think these teams fare up in this matchup?
Well, these two teams, it's essentially a match made in heaven for a football game. We've got the two number 1 seeds in the Super Bowl for only the second time since 1994, and the number 1 scoring offense versus the number 1 scoring defense for the first time since 91, so automatically you get a great matchup. You got both of these teams have won on the road at MetLife Stadium against the Giants this season. 23-0, the Seahawks got the win, and 41-23, the Broncos topped the Giants. And then you've also got a great setup when it comes to the receiving core of the Broncos. Back in 1987, when they played the Redskins in the Super Bowl, they had their receiving core. They were called the Three Amigos. Well, right now you've got enough to basically create a mariachi band. I mean, they've got Demaryius Thomas, Julius Thomas, Wes Welker, Eric Decker, you add Joel Dressen, you add Jacob Tammy, and all of them are receiving from Peyton Manning. But take a look at the Seahawks secondary. Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, Byron Maxwell. Those guys have been lights out all year. So it's going to really come down, I think, through the air to see which team wins this.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the weapons that the Broncos have. And the Seahawks, people argue that the Saints have a passing attack similar to the Broncos, but the Seahawks didn't have to face the Saints in the Superdome. They got them at their place. So I think, playing at a neutral site, not in front of the 12th man, it's going to be really interesting to see how Seattle's defense fares. Their splits against offense, home and away, I should say, in terms of defense have been drastically different. Still a great defense nonetheless, but, Sherman's going to be blanketing Demaryius Thomas, we figure, all day. But how Wes Welker fares and how Eric Decker fares in this matchup is going to be vital to the outcome of the game. And also the rushing attack. If Seattle can establish the run early with Marshawn Lynch, that's going to go a long way for Seattle to gain the victory. Against the Chargers, Broncos only allowed 65 yards rushing. Against New England, they only allowed 64 yards rushing. But in both of those games, Denver jumped out to the early lead, so San Diego and New England had to throw to get back in it. If Seattle can establish Lynch early, it could be a long day for Denver.
That is true. Certainly, you got to think about whoever gets the jump is going to have the edge here. Not many times have we seen teams come back in the Super Bowl. Of course, that happened to Peyton Manning the last time he was in when the Saints came back to beat the Colts.
So the thing you talk about is Peyton Manning. He's the last person to be thinking about it, but if he loses this game, 1 and 2 in Super Bowls all time, his legacy is going to take a knock. It's unjustified, but the talk will still be there if he does not win this ball game.
Another interesting note, Seattle has 0 players with any Super Bowl experience. So they've got a lot of new faces to the Super Bowl. And even Pete Carroll, head coach for the Seahawks, said he has a concern for the players just being content with just getting to the Super Bowl, just being there, not necessarily winning it. He said that as a team, as a coaching staff, they never really talked about getting to the Super Bowl, what they would do if they got to the Super Bowl. They didn't really prepare for this. So, they have a lot of preparing to do before they play.
Another interesting note to factor in is that 31 players in these two teams hail from the SEC. The second most coming from the Pac-12, 23. Tennessee has 5 players, the most of either team from the SEC. Obviously, Peyton Manning coming from Tennessee, Robert Ayers, the defensive end for the Broncos as well. So looking at the SEC dominating in this Super Bowl, it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, we gotta love the SEC representation. It is our show, so we're happy to talk about it. One big point that I'm looking for is the media coverage from this. Of course, everybody's talking about Richard Sherman right now, and the question is, what's Fox going to do? Because we saw on the Conference Championship Sunday, Aaron Andrews obviously had the big interview that exposed Sherman as what many people are calling a villain, and then Terry Bradshaw essentially goaded him into parading around the stadium with the NFC Championship trophy or something along those lines. So Fox is clearly eating this up. But who's ultimately going to have the final say in this game? Is it going to be Peyton with his legacy? Is it going to be Russell Wilson, 2 years in the league and potentially with a Super Bowl MVP? Or even Marshawn Lynch, who has actually refused to talk to the media this entire season? Because if Beast Mode shows up in the Super Bowl, you know people will be wanting him to talk.
Talking more about Richard Sherman, the villain of this game, we all know he's a very smart guy. Graduated from Stanford with 3.839 GPA. I think he either knows what he's doing. I think he's trying to grab all of this media attention, talk his name up. Yeah, he says his numbers speak for themselves. The film speaks for himself. He's one of the top players, yeah, but I think he is taking too much away from the Seahawks. He didn't single-handedly get the Seahawks to the Super Bowl. The team got them there. So it'll be interesting to see how Sherman plays under all this media attention. So it could be good for him, bad for him. But it'll also be interesting to see how Russell Wilson plays with, I think a lot of the pressure will be taken off Russell Wilson, it only being his second year in the NFL, and he's playing in the Super Bowl. So I think it could be interesting.
At this point in the game, Richard Sherman is a household name. Everybody across, even if you're not an avid football fan, you know Richard Sherman's name. So he has established himself as the best cornerback in the league. I don't think there's an argument anymore. He's the guy. The play he made, Kaepernick's throw to Crabtree, it was a good enough throw to be a touchdown. And more than half of the corners, I'd say there's only a couple other corners in the game who make that play. He's taller than your average cornerback, and to make that play, Kaepernick got it up enough, but he's just showing that he's the best cornerback in the game. Yeah, he talks, but he's backing it up, so it's hard to get on him for it. And I think it's unfair to judge a guy on what he does in between the lines, because never has a guy been scrutinized so much on what he does in between the lines besides maybe Ndamukong Suh, with the way that he goes after players. So, the fact that he's mic'd up, you see that he's not, he doesn't have a lot of profanity when he's talking trash. He's playing the game and he's playing hard. Anybody who played sports, specifically football is a very, very emotional game. And to go out there, you're throwing it all out on the line, you're physically exhausted, and when you make a play like that to send your team to the Super Bowl, it's a feeling that so few have experienced, that how can you judge someone on it when you haven't been in that situation yourself? So I think he deserves some slack. Some of it may come off as a little extreme, but he's one of the best players in the game. You can't take that away from him.
And no matter what happens, people will be watching for Richard Sherman. People will be watching for Peyton Manning. And obviously people will be watching for the commercials. I'm really interested to see what the TV ratings look like when the Seahawks have the ball, because just so many storylines go out the window when that happens. Should be a very interesting situation.
Well, this is going to be a great matchup. You got Peyton Manning with a high-powered offense, and then the Seahawks defense is very stout. You got the passing defense for Seattle is number 1 in the league, and then you got their rushing defense is actually number 7. So I think this is going to be a great matchup. Seattle, they don't have any players in the Super Bowl, so they're going to be hungry to get that win, and Peyton Manning's going to want to get his second Super Bowl win. So let's go with predictions. So Haley, what's your prediction for this game?
My prediction is 28-14 Broncos over the Seahawks.
I got the Broncos 23-20 over Seattle. Peyton Manning, Super Bowl MVP.
Well, both of these teams done well all season, but you look at the statistics of where they've played. Seattle at home, 29-3, 45-17, 34-7. They dominate teams when they're at CenturyLink Field. The Broncos on the road have scored at least 28 points in every single road game this season. I don't expect that to stop. I think they've got the edge, particularly because Seattle 12-7, 14-9, some of their scores on the road. I think the Broncos are too much overall, and I go 38-23 Denver.
Yeah, I too. I'm going to take the Broncos with the legacy of Peyton Manning. I'm going to take Broncos 28-17 over the Seahawks.
Well, I'm actually going to disagree with all of you. I think that Seattle's defense is going to come big in the second half. I'm going to stop that passing attack from Peyton Manning, and the Seahawks are going to win 35-28. Well, thank you for watching this edition of the SEC Roundtable, and we'll send it back to Jeremy.
That's going to be it for this week's episode of Capital City Sports. Remember to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at CCS on SGTV. On behalf of Capital City Sports, I'm Jeremy Urso. Thank you for watching.